His second day of January 1935 started like any other day for the hotel clerk on reception duty. A man going by the name of Roland Owen walked in and requested a room. He was given the key to room 146 of the hotel president in Kansas City. The man told hotel staff he was from Los Angeles and had just come over from the nearby Muehlbach Hotel, now the Kansas City Marriott. After becoming upset over the price he was being charged there, he brought with him only a few belongings, a hairbrush, a comb and toothpaste, and no luggage. When interviewed later, hotel employees said they estimated the man was between 20 to 25 years old, while some others thought he was as old as 35. All agreed, though, that he had a large scar on his face and a cauliflower ear, a condition very common with wrestlers and boxers. After placing his comb brush and toothpaste on the side table, Roland followed bellboy Randolph Props back out of the room. Randolph locked the door for him and gave him the key, then watched with curiosity. As Roland walked out of the hotel and into the city, hotel staff said Roland Owen was a strange guest. He kept the shade drawn almost all the time and seemed very nervous when hotel staff came into the room. A day after he arrived at the hotel, a maid said she was cleaning his room when he answered the phone, and she later recalled that she overheard him saying, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry. I've just had breakfast. No, I'm not hungry." The maid later reported she heard two male voices inside the room. When the maid knocked on the room door to perform her cleaning duties, a rough-sounding male voice responded and said, "Who is it?" To which she explained she was bringing towels. The voice said, "We don't need any," even though the room hadn't been cleaned at this stage, and there wasn't any towels in the room. On January the 3rd, 1935, a Kansas City Water Department employee named Robert Lane was driving home when he was flagged down by a man running the opposite way down the street. The night was cold, but the man had no coat and wore only a vest. Lane noticed he had a large cut on his arm that he was holding to stop the blood, and when he asked about it, the hitchhiker replied he'd kill the person who did it. Mr. Lane dropped him off at a taxi rank, but it wasn't until he read the press stories that his memory was jolted. 3 months later, when the funeral of the mystery murder victim was held, Lane went to view the body and saw a cut on the dead man's arms that looked remarkably similar to the cut on the man who had climbed into his vehicle. Lane told police he believed the man he had picked up that night was the same man who was later killed in the hotel. The problem was that none of the workers in the hotel saw Roland leave his room at any time. On the 3rd, another sighting was by a bar worker in the city who had seen the dead man drinking with two women also on the 3rd, and according to what he overheard, they were moving from bar to bar. Other bartenders in the city allegedly backed up the sightings. Just a few days after the mystery man died, under very suspicious circumstances, 2 more homicides occurred across the city, and the investigation into Roland had already begun to lose momentum. Though Roland's behavior struck the President Hotel staff as somewhat peculiar, they didn't give it too much thought. After all, the hotel often played host to out-of-town pleasure seeker and businessmen, many looking for some late-night company, and the less the staff got involved, the better. Another maid said she came to clean room 146 and, finding it locked, used a passkey to enter. She found the occupant sitting silently in the dark. The room had been locked from the outside, and no one said he had misplaced his key. He didn't offer an explanation as to who could have locked him inside the room. 2 days later, on the 4th of January, switchboard operator Della Ferguson arrived for her shift to find the indicator. Light was on for room 146. As the room's foot was off the hook, she called through to the main desk, who sent Randolph to check what was needed. When the clerk arrived at the room, the Do Not Disturb sim was hanging on the door's handle. He knocked numerous times, and a voice from inside told him to enter. It was apparent that the door was locked from the inside, so Randolph went back down to the main desk. He told Della that the man was probably drunk, and to wait another hour before sending him back up. An hour later, another billboy, Harold Pike, went to the room with a key and let himself in. The curtains were closed and the room was in darkness, but he could see the outline of a naked man on the bed. He appeared drunk to the porter, and the bedding looked like it had a dark spreading stain around the prone figure. Randolph put the phone back on the hook and apologized for the disturbance. He saw a note on the sideboard that stated, "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." Another hour passed, and Della saw the phone was off the hook again. This time, Randolph went back upstairs to the room and knocked before letting himself in with a key. Inside, Roland was sitting curled in a corner of the room, his head in his hands. Randolph turned the light on and recoiled in shock. The victim was drenched in blood. The walls and ceiling of the main room were liberally sprayed with it. Also, same story in the bathroom. Randolph ran back downstairs to raise the alarm. The assistant manager and another hotel worker managed to sit Roland on the side of the bathtub. When they saw his injuries, they immediately called the police. Emergency personnel arrived at the scene and found that the mysterious guest had been bound at the neck, wrists, and ankles, and appeared to have been tortured. He had a fractured skull and had been stabbed multiple times in the chest, with 2 wounds having punctured his lung and one barely missing his heart. His wrists and ankles had been tied with electrical cord, with another length of cord around his neck. Doctors on the scene concluded that the injuries were at least 6 to 7 hours old. There were no clothes to be found in the room, and the only clues were an unlit cigarette and 4 fingerprints that were thought to have come from a woman. The bruising around his neck suggested someone had tried to strangle him. The skull fracture was from being hit over the head multiple times with a blunt object. They cut him free from the cords and helped him onto the bed. When asked by a doctor who had done this to him, he answered with a confident nobody as he began to lose consciousness from the blood loss. He said he had fallen and hit his head on the bathtub. The doctor then asked if he had been trying to kill himself, and Roland responded decidedly with a no. Several moments after this utterance, he lost consciousness. He was taken to a nearby hospital, but was already in a comatose state on arrival. Shortly before midnight on the 5th of January, Roland, the strange guest of the hotel president, died of his injuries. Suicide was still touted as a cause of death, despite the coroner saying otherwise. Also, no knives were found in the room. The only other items they found were 2 hotel drink glasses. One had been chipped and left in the sink, a hairpin, 1 unsmoked cigarette, and a full bottle of diluted sulfuric acid. According to the hotel staff, they recalled Owen had mentioned he was from Los Angeles. However, LA authorities were unable to find any records of a Roland T. Owen. This information naturally brought up the question whether that was really the victim's name. Police then began to investigate the mysterious man, whom Owen had referred to as Don several times at the hotel. However, with only that as a lead, once again, police inquiries came to a dead end. After the announcement of the burial, which was to be in a pauper's grave, the funeral home received an anonymous call, stating that a proper funeral was to be given, and that the caller would meet all costs. They were also specific about ordering 13 American Beauty roses to be sent to Roland Owen's funeral. "I'm doing this for my sister. I'll send you a $5 bill special delivery," the caller said. On March the 23rd, 1935, money bundled into a newspaper was sent to the funeral home. Also anonymously, the funeral roses had a card attached that said, "Love forever, Louise." Fast forward to a year and a half later in 1936. A friend of Ruby Ogletree found an American Weekly piece on Owen's case. She informed Ruby of her suspicions, who in turn identified Roland T. Owen as her son, who had left Birmingham in 1934, and whose real name was actually Artemus Ogletree, age 17. Ruby had received 3 typed letters from her son in the spring of 1935, including one that claimed he was in Egypt. However, because these were delivered after his death, this deepened the mystery, and only led to more suspicion because Artemus didn't know how to type. Also, the tone and colloquial style of the letter was definitely unfamiliar and unrecognizable as her son's. According to Ruby, she positively identified her son by the scar on the scalp above his ear, which she said was the result of a childhood accident when he was burned by hot grease. Ruby Ogletree said she had no contact with her son since he disappeared in 1934, though there wasn't any evidence connecting the murder victim. As the son of Mrs. Ogletree, police were eventually inclined to believe her, though experts claimed this acknowledgement was only based on a general lack of any other evidence in the case. The police continued to follow any leads that might give them vital clues to solving this case. It was discovered that, the same afternoon, a certain Jean Owen had checked into the hotel and was given room 148 right next door to Roland's room. It would become a source of much confusion down the line, as Jean obviously had the same surname as the one Roland had given. Reception. That evening, a male friend visited her and stayed for approximately 2 hours before leaving at around 11 p.m. She later claimed she heard male and female voices, shouting and swearing at each other, but couldn't pinpoint exactly what room they were coming from. The other hotel guest was not really a genuine guest. The bellhop, who had been on duty that night, described her as a commercial woman who often frequented the rooms of the hotel's lonely male patrons. Late at night on the evening of January the 4th, she came into the hotel searching for a man in room 126. However, despite her describing the man as being a very prompt customer, she couldn't seem to locate him. After searching for well over an hour on multiple floors, she eventually gave up and left the hotel. The theory goes that the escort visited the victim, but Roland had no money to pay her, and so she went to get her pimp, who was the man she was seen in the elevator with an hour later. The same night that Jean heard the arguing voices in a room nearby, elevator operator Charles Blocker had started his shift. He usually worked the midnight to 8 a.m. shift, and was more than used to drunk people coming back from a night out or attending a room party. He confirmed Jean's statement to police that a loud party was taking place in one of the rooms, but it was not within his job description to tell the offending guests to keep the noise down. He nevertheless felt guilty, taking new guests to their allotted rooms on the 10th floor, where it had become unacceptably loud. When investigators searched the room, the strangeness of the whole situation continued. There were no clothes in the room at all. The hotel amenities such as soap and toothpaste were also missing, as well as anything that could have been used as a murder weapon. The only thing of note that detectives found were 4 small fingerprints on the telephone stand, though they were never identified. Furthermore, detectives discovered that Roland T. Owen never existed. There was no record of any such man having lived anywhere in the United States. They reached out to the public to come forward with any information they had, and if they recognized the murder victim from the published photos. Investigators received numerous phone calls and tips. One person said the man would finally be buried next to his sister, Another claimed the man had been married at the time, and that he had had an affair, this being the reason he was killed. The caller had arranged 2 women and himself to visit him at the hotel to dish out the justice that cheated deserve. One interesting lead quickly surfaced the neighboring hotel that Owen had complained about. The high prices contacted police claiming that a man matching the description had stayed at the hotel on January 1st. He had checked in under the name of Eugene K. Scott. However, upon further investigation, the police reached the same dead end they had with Roland T. Owen. No man named Eugene K. Scott had any record of ever existing. To this day, the case remains unsolved, opened from time to time by the Kansas police if new pieces of evidence unfold for the time being. However, it seems that the mystery of room 146 may never truly be solved due to the lack of solid evidence or suspects. A myriad of theories have since arisen. The most popular belief was that he was involved in organized crime, while others suggest he was killed by a jilted lover. Over the years, various letters and phone calls have been received by the Kansas City PD, but rather than helping solve the murder, they are simply added to the piles of leads that petered out to nothing. In 2003, someone got in touch with Kansas City Public Librarian John Horner with what they said was new information about Owen's death. The caller didn't identify himself, but said he was going through the papers of a deceased person when they found old newspaper clippings of the mystery murder case. The person also reported there was something in the box mentioned by the newspaper that tied the deceased to the murder. The caller wouldn't say what that something was and never called back. The case of the murder in room 146 is a mystery that certainly has stood the test of time, simply because the deeper we go, the more confusing it gets. It's one of those cases that continually arouses people's curiosity. There's always the hope that one day the truth will come out, and the unfortunate guest of room 146 will finally be laid to rest. My dear oddity, armchair detectives, whodunit? I don't think we'll ever know. This case is very old now. It will be interesting to discuss the various suggestions as to what happened. Probably some sort of mafia involvement. I would think the fact that he would not name his killers and wouldn't tell what happened to him. Think the suggestion that he might have been visited by an escort lady and didn't pay. I mean, that's a bit silly, isn't it? He was in hiding for days, keeping the window shut, and if a pimp did assault him and torture him, and it was a first encounter, then he's most definitely going to tell the police that he was attacked, wouldn't he? I would assume. So, I think he has crossed someone, and they have come for retribution. It's possible that he may have got some young lady in his hometown pregnant, and the brother, or uncle or father has searched for him across the country and somehow found out where he is possible. But I think unlikely. I don't know what the connection is with Louise. Was she a gangster mold? Did you somehow know him from these group of people? We'll never know. But it's more than likely he's double-crossed someone, or did something to annoy certain people and he was in hiding in these various hotels, and they've tracked him down somehow. I mean, the theory about him getting a girl pregnant in his hometown and the brother, or the father, or both of them coming after him, it doesn't really jail with me because would they really torture him like that? Bind his wrists, and what did they do to his scalp? I mean, you know, they might beat him up, give him a good beating, but this torture thing, that's like sort of mafia to me. What has he done? What has he done? Has he taken money? Has he been messing around with the head honcho's gal? And that's probably the scenario. Well, I'm thinking along those lines, and about the 13 roses I had to look. The general consensus on Google from numerous sites is that 13 roses means eternal friendship or a secret admirer. Now, if they're red roses, there's love involved. It doesn't necessarily mean a sexual love, but a love. A deep love. So was it perhaps a slightly delusional woman? Or even a man who has seen the newspaper article or the numerous newspaper articles about this young lad, and she's just sent this for her own personal reasons? Has it got anything to do with the case? We'll never know. We'll never know. The reason why I put forward that theory is because if they were really involved in this torture murder, would they be putting clues out there? Would they be ringing the undertakers, the funeral parlor, and no sending money for roses that could lead to their whereabouts? Not too sure about that one. It's one of those tantalizing mysteries that cannot and will not be solved. Even that caller at the end, was that really anything? Was he hoaxing? Didn't ring back. What do you think? My dear odds, what is your opinion? Do you have any clues? What does the American Beauty roses signify? Is there anything in that I've missed? I'm not American, so I don't know about that. Whether there's any significance to American Beauty, do they symbolize something? Please let me know. Well, I can't think of anything in the next main presentation. Not the middle of the month one, or the end of the month, the main presentation at the start of the month. Going to be doing one more recent. And the reason is that I do have some slight connection to the case. Not really a connection, but I was absolutely around when it happened. I do believe I met the victim, either several days or a few weeks beforehand. I'm pretty positive it was her, but when I say I was around, I wasn't around. When the incident happened, I was around that area. My sister had lived there. I used to go drinking there, and I didn't live very far away from it. Just wanted to clarify that more about that. When the time comes, I'll be working on that case next. Well, my dear, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much as always for your support, and as always, God bless. Take care. Stay safe, and I hope to see you again very soon, God willing. Take care. Bye-bye. How dare they? The rotten rosters. Never mind calling the police, calling the riot squad. Damaging boats. Boatic outrageous.